Number one thing that will ruin the relationship and end with a breakup. You guessed it. It's communication, or rather, lack of it. Now I'm going to speak from perspective of a man. In general, when our counterpart is displeased with choice of our action, a good idea might be to sit down with them in a calm, peaceful environment and talk through it to address our loved ones' concerns and reassure them. What happens though is often men don't want to talk, especially if they sense or there is a subtle fear that the conversation might lead to conflict, drama, something that they won't be able to fix, especially if that has happened before, in the past. So they don't want us to repeat. And then what we men do is we assume that this is most likely going to happen again in the future. And that is called projection of painful past in the present moment. And what projection does is it doesn't allow our partners to enter in the present moment. And we are not meeting our partners where they are now. We have decided that this is what it's going to be, and by deciding this, we are predicting the future in order to avoid pain. When we men do this, we do this in order to avoid a disaster. We think this is the way how to do it in order to maintain a relationship. Even if it has been dysfunctional, toxic, abusive, there is still part of us deep down that hopes and thinks that this relationship can work out. That's why men are the ones who usually stay longer in the relationship and give up later on than women tend to do. Now, you can call it immature, insecure, silly, not responsible, not accountable. And all of this is true. Why? Because when there is an external conflict with someone else and we don't want to deal with it, we don't want to address that, then in that moment we know that our wounded inner child has been triggered, and this child self is the one who is acting like this to avoid the conflict, not our adult, matured selves who have like common sense, but the inner child. Now, this inner child part of ours got traumatized in early childhood, got abused, rejected, abandoned, hurt, and still this part wants to hold on to relationship, no matter how toxic it is, no matter how dysfunctional or abusive it is. Now, this part of ours wants to appease and please our counterpart in the relationship, get on well terms with it. It's a self-protective mechanism, basically. When you notice this, have a compassion. Address this part that needs love and validation. And the more you do it, the more you will be able to recognize this part in others as well, when other people are also struggling. When there is a stalemate in adult relationship, it's when usually two small kids showed up in that relationship. Two scared kids who don't want to make their parents angry, even though the reality is different right now. Like, we're not kids anymore. We're grown-ups in grown-up bodies, and normally like there is not like parents next to us anymore, so we don't need to appease our parents anymore. But yet there is part of us deep inside, the child part of us, that still lives in that same reality, that same dynamic. And from a child's perspective, this makes total sense. Why? Because children are dependent on adults for their survival. So it makes sense to please the adults so that they don't get hurt and they can survive. So they do everything they can to maintain the relationship. Every time you notice this part coming up in your life, it's very important to connect with that part, validate that part, do your best to meet its needs. The more we do this, the more we will heal this part, allow it to integrate within us, to mature, so that when the next time conflict comes, we will be more grounded and we will feel more secured and we'll be ready to deal with that more. But the paradox is what we choose to avoid will destroy our relationship anyways. It will just drag out longer than necessary. And we're going to waste our time, our precious time, that could be resolved quicker. And that could end up either with us separating from our partner, or that could even bring deeper connection with our partner. That's common when couples share that their connection deepened after they resolved some of the biggest challenges and conflicts they had with each other. By avoiding the conflict, the rupture grows bigger and bigger, and it creates even more mutual distrust. A vicious cycle, because the counterparts in relationship, they don't trust the other, that together they can resolve the conflict. And so couples are not talking to each other, and as the time goes, they notice that, hey, this thing still have not been resolved, because they don't trust each other and they don't talk to each other. So one reinforces the other. It's like keeps the wheel spinning. Would you rather risk making your woman mad and do your best to resolve the situation, or ignore it until it grows bigger and bigger, gains momentum through accumulation, adding more and more stuff to it, and resentment and bitterness also building up as a result, to reach a point where it would at some point erupt in extreme ways beyond repair. Trust can be broken easily, but it's not easy to build back the trust. I don't think that's something that we consciously choose and want to do it, but unconsciously we do it quite often. One small thing leads to another, and the next, and the next. And it grows over time, it becomes bigger. What this does is it trains couples not to trust each other, even with this small thing in the beginning. What it does is a man or a woman, they look at this situation, they look at their partner, it's like, they ignored this. They don't hear me. They don't see me. They don't acknowledge me. And over time it grows to a big elephant in the room that everybody knows it's there, but nobody wants to address it. Both sides have reached a point where they know that the potential conversation might be like very triggering. Why? Because they want to be right and they want to prove the other side wrong. They have invested so much in staying right, no matter what. And in this case, it's a win-lose or zero-sum game, not a win-win game. And in these circumstances, it's very difficult to negotiate and resolve any conflicts at all. Like it creates resistance. Why it happens? Well, our insecure egos want to reinforce their fragile sense of selves by reinforcing the past identity, which then gives them a brief sense of feeling secure, but that never lasts. So that has to be reinforced again and again and again, endlessly, like it never ends. So for ego, being right equals sense of feeling secure, even if it means that being right is to stay in a disempowered state, staying in a victim mode. That's more important. And how we perceive things is also can be quite subjective, right? For someone, the same situation will seem as small. For someone else, it's a big deal. It's serious. Now, our child part thinks that by avoiding this, we will prevent the disaster and avoid the suffering. But actually, that's not the case. What is required is actually to address that, which is counterintuitive to our self-preservation. When there is a rupture in a relationship, ideally, man can take on a leadership role and come forward to his female partner and provide a safe container, a masculine containment, and address this situation together. This would allow a woman to feel more safe, and that can build, again, more trust in a man and his capabilities to address challenges in life and take care of his loved ones. I'm not saying that every time a woman disagrees with you, you need to explain yourself always, or you need to validate yourself in the eyes of others. I think it's based on the context. And if you would always seek validation, woman, like over time, she would lose respect for you. Again, like you're a boy or a child who seeks approve of his mother, like over time we would start to resent you for that, if this goes like to extreme. So it's based on context. If you are not sure, like check in, A good idea is to cultivate like presence, and because women might not always also like say to you directly what's going on based on their feelings and emotions. So if you're not sure, better communicate than not ignore that, or not being aware of that, because that can again blow up in your face later on. It might blow up in your face that you didn't notice that earlier. And to women, it might seem that you were careless, you didn't care, you don't care. Contrary to popular and unrealistic expectation that ideal relationships or good relationships shouldn't involve conflicts, that's not the case. Relationships and business is two of the most triggering and transformative potentials in life that can help us to grow as individuals, mature, and develop mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Because relationships and business will highlight our wounds, aspects of us that needs to be addressed and healed in order for us to move forward in more optimal, whole way.